There we go. So if you
Good
are coming,
afternoon.
I
Go
was
ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you're coming after Kathy said this, please put your name and where you're from in the chat. Is that what
Exactly
you
where I
were
was
going to
going.
say?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
As you come on, there's still many people coming on. We've just started the recording and the formal welcome to you. Please do enter in the chat where you are from, your name, and just let us know where you are from, the great diversity of people that are here. Because of the very large attendance we expect, and Anne and I are not necessarily the technological support. Our colleague who isn't here today. So we really want to make sure we keep the bandwidth open to make sure we can send this out to all of you. We are going to hold questions till the end. And I'm so welcome all of you. I want you to know that Catherine and myself intended Anne's presentation today to be a gift to all of you for the holidays, to help think about how together we can all celebrate as people experience cognitive losses, and we make adjustments for quality of life and for a peaceful joy over the holidays. Um, Anne will be introducing details of herself, but I want to say this is my second time I've had the opportunity to hear this. It is so, it's very warming to hear Anne talk about how we can celebrate the holidays with some of our family members, friends, or people we help support in a way that can be a time for them to not feel anxious and for us to feel anxious, but to be able to continue to celebrate holidays in a way that will be memorable. So it's a pleasure to be able to offer this to all of you, and I hope it does make a difference over the holidays for you to think of ways to also for yourself to make it a peaceful time and a time that will be memorable for each of you. We will hold any questions to the end, and you can put them in the Q&A. You have the Q&A. I know sometimes some of you only have the chat box. So as you go onto the chat box, you may put questions later on. I will be monitoring them as well. Try to also monitor for any technical that I may be able to assist you with. May not be able to at this point, that will monitor them, and be assured that if you do have, for some reason, your internet connection cuts out for a minute, don't worry. We are recording this and it will be sent out within a few days to you. Also with handouts that Anne will be adding to the recording to help give you some information. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to, I guess I forgot to really do a good job of introducing myself. I am with the National Task Group on ID and Dementia Practices. For many of you who are NTG Arts, affiliated regional trainers, you know that you were probably the person that you probably received your training from me, along with my colleague, Catherine Pierce, who's not able to be here today. I am continue to do this training. We continue to add on. For those of you who aren't affiliated regional trainers, we welcome to look up on the NTG to be able to join us. We'll be in Columbia in a couple of weeks, and we'll be doing an online 2-day, 3-day session as well. And you can send in to myself, and I'll put in the chat box my email and Catherine's email for you to be able to send in if you'd like further information. We look forward to you coming to join us with the trainings and this training as well. Also want you to know, those of you who are NTG affiliated regional trainers, to update you, we're now over 1,000 people around the country who are eligible. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over. We're so grateful for colleagues like Anne, and you've been affiliated with Catherine for a long time, but also with the NTG as well. And so thank you for all you do, and I'm turning it over to you.
Well, and thank you to you, Kathy, and to the NTG for addressing this topic and including me to share some thoughts. I am an occupational therapist and a social worker, and at least the last 20 years of my career, and I think at this point it's more like 25, have been spent working with older adults and or people living with dementia. And it's a topic that is very close to my heart. And what I'm hoping to do today is to share some strategies that have proven helpful. And my goal is to address this group knowing that some of you are professional caregivers of people with intellectual disabilities and dementia. Some of you may be taking care of a family member or a friend with intellectual disabilities and or dementia. And some of you might be both. So as Kathy mentioned, I'm sorry, I work with Catherine a lot and it pops out of my mouth. So I want to make sure that we're giving you from both sides how to make it work for your person, but also how to make it work for you, because you're a key part of this equation. So what I'm going to think about with you, one is, what are some of the challenges that any of us might face, particularly during holiday celebrations? And then how might the presence of cognitive losses affect those challenges? And the third thing is, how might we as family or paid caregivers create an environment to minimize those challenges and help everyone, including us, enjoy the occasion more? What is it about holidays? Holiday celebrations can run the gamut between idyllic and miserable, and endless possibilities in between. So I want to think for a minute about why that is. Okay. Anybody, whatever their cognitive status is, may experience stressors related to holiday celebrations. This is like stating the obvious. Okay. And we have to think about why that is. One is, we may have expectations that probably come from past experience or the media or our own hopes and wishes. And we may need to think about how realistic are they? Life is, in my experience, often not the way it is in the movies. My personal life is unlikely to show up on the Hallmark Channel. So we really have to think about, are we setting our expectations higher than what's actually reasonably possible? And if we are, and we can't change things to meet our expectations, we may need to re-examine what they are. Another problem is with family visiting or family traveling, people get really overtired. And fatigue, as you well know, makes everything more difficult. Okay? And visiting with family, I feel this is terribly obvious, but here we go. Visiting with family, or perhaps not being able to, sometimes has us revisiting old issues. Have you ever been together with a family member, maybe a sibling if you have one, and all of a sudden it's like the two of you are 3 years old again? You're fussing about stuff that happened when you were little kids. Holidays do tend to cause people to reminisce, and that can be bittersweet because sometimes we aren't prepared for those emotions, especially if we've experienced some losses. That can make it very hard. And of course, there are multiple extra demands on everyone's time, energy, and focus. We can get overstimulated, we can get frustrated. And I want to drill that down a little bit, get more specific. So, caregivers may have issues too. And in addition to being concerned about who you're taking care of, you've got your own challenges going on, and you're trying to support others. So I'm going to ask you to do two things for me. Put one or two words in the chat if you wish, or just think about it otherwise, and tell us in a word or two what might trigger your person with getting stressed during the holidays? And I'll give you a moment to do that. Let me see if I can get at the chat so I can actually. Okay, to a lot of commotion, change in routine, big crowds, trying to make things perfect. Uh, yeah, yeah, that's it. So here's my other question for you. What can trigger your own stress during holiday celebrations? The same things, exactly. And several people are saying that. Yeah, fear, grief, demands from others. And then if your person, this is a good one, if your person is getting stressed, that contributes to your stress as well. So, thank you. And there's a lot of overlap on those lists. A few people said, well, all the same things. So we're all in this boat together. We just got to figure out some strategies. And so first I want to think about uh, challenges and about what you might do to change your approach to make things go better. So here's a few things to keep in mind. Oh, don't fail me now, computer. There we go. Okay. So one thing is think about what is really important to you and to your person. There may be traditions that are no longer meaningful, but are still a lot of work that you might be able to modify or delete altogether. It's also, particularly as a caregiver, important to set some limits that um, not only for what activities you will do, what activities will be successful for whoever you're taking care of. A colleague of mine taught me a wonderful phrase, which is no is a complete sentence. And I go back to that often. And another colleague recently said, well, try not to say no. Try to find a different way of saying yes. So, for example, your family says, we're all going to the mall on December 23rd. Want to come? And perhaps the answer, rather than no, would be, can't do that, but why don't you come by for cookies when you're done? So, or if you're hosting a celebration, maybe telling people, I can't make the whole meal this time, but I'd love to bring something if we could do a potluck. So you're offering a positive alternative. You're still not losing the opportunity to be together, which for many people is the key point about any of these celebrations. And the last piece there is get support. Ask for help if you need it. So a couple of things as a person's cognitive abilities are changing. Okay. It's, as you well know, it's its own set of challenges uh, in terms of adapting to changes. And your job may also include helping other people to adapt. Okay. In particular, in the last few years, the person with cognitive loss may not have seen some family, even maybe since before COVID. So they may have difficulty remembering who they are, or just their cognitive issues alone may make that difficult. Uh, and you can't really change that for your person, but you could do some pre-education with your people who are coming so they will understand what has changed. They will understand how the person is functioning now and will not be like startled when they see the person and they seem very different. Sometimes people find cognitive issues to be kind of frightening. I mean, visitors may find that. So if they're familiar with what the situation is and how it's been changing, and then also strategies you have found helpful in interacting with the person, share them, give them ideas, and alert them. Don't ever come up from behind and touch her on the shoulder because she'll jump and she'll scream. Well, that's me, actually. But give them an alert. Here's something we find doesn't work out well, so try to avoid that. Okay? So share your learning as you adapted, so that your visitors can too. Oh, come on, it wants to. There we go. So some effective strategies. One is recognizing what you can control, because it's not everything. One of my favorite expressions is, you can't control the wind, but you can set your sails. Okay? So plan ahead. If you're going to a gathering at somebody else's space, identify a quiet space you can use in case your person needs to take a little break. Okay? Recognize their abilities and adapt to them. Okay? And tell others how to do the same. And we'll talk about adapting activities to abilities in a little more detail in a moment. But first, I wanted to touch on some communication strategies. I suspect you already know this, but I want to build from this baseline. The brains of people with cognitive losses continue to respond to active listening, friendly faces, a caring tone of voice, sharing activities, and overall TLC, which is pretty much the same as the rest of us. So it continues to be a comforting and positive approach, whatever somebody's cognitive status is. It is important to keep in mind, and I've heard this number anywhere from 80 to 95%, how we get our message across is almost entirely nonverbal. So it's things like body language, tone of voice. I went to a seminar once on public speaking and body language, was talking about getting your message across. And the speaker, it was in a ballroom with small, 10-person tables. The speaker went around from table to table, and she folded her arms over her chest, and she gritted her teeth, and she looked at the table and mouthed. And when she finished going around the room, she asked us what we thought she'd said. And a lot of us didn't want to say what we thought she'd said, because it sounded like it was going to be pretty rude. And it turned out she was saying big dog. So it was all about her body language and her tone of voice and her face. So caring body language, a smile, and a friendly tone of voice work wonders pretty much with everybody. Okay? And if the person is open to it, a touch or a hug can be a wonderful way to communicate. Think about keeping your sentences simple. Don't over-explain things. And it's important to express one thought at a time and allow time for the person to process that and respond. And it may take longer than you think it will. Give it a little extra time. I sometimes jumped in a little too soon. I will refer to my mother-in-law here and there, who had vascular dementia and was a wonderful person. But I had to back off and let her respond, because it just took longer for things to process through as time went on. Okay. Talk to adults as if they're adults. Okay, there's condescending baby talk, hi honey kind of stuff. Some people will find that very offensive. And there was a study done of people living in nursing homes who had cognitive issues and were no longer interacting communication-wise. with other people. And the researchers tried talking to them, talking down to them, and they got mad. They maybe didn't know what the words were, but they caught on to that tone. And as adults, we know we're adults. So unless this is a special relationship and this is something you always do with this person and you both love it, be thoughtful about that. Another thing is, if something goes wrong, it's fine to apologize whether or not it was your fault. It's fine. We've all got big shoulders. We can do this. But that can really lower the stress level so then we can problem solve. And if you're having trouble getting what someone is telling you, think about what you think they're trying to say or the mood and respond to that. And they can always guide you more if you're missing the point. So if somebody is sad, it's fine to say, I'm sorry you're having a hard day. Can I help? Or anxious, where's dad? Or where is this family member or that family member? A good response for that, especially if dad is passed on, a good response to that might be something like, ooh, that handsome guy you married 60 years ago. And then maybe get out a picture album and look at pictures and talk about them. Another one that if people are not, even if they're living at an address they feel is home, if they say, I want to go home, they may be thinking of an earlier home in their lives. And so a great response to that is something like, tell me about your home. What's your favorite room? Come up with some possibilities to talk about the memories themselves rather than getting into a discussion about whether or not the person is actually home. Another set of strategies is organize. And so planning ahead, simplifying, prioritizing, and simplifying. Good strategies. Another key to success is engaging in activities. Okay? And boredom and inactivity can increase negative behaviors really in all of us. This is not exclusive to people with cognitive issues. And activities bring up positive emotions and help preserve skills. And they provide an opportunity to connect in meaningful ways with a person with dementia and for that person to connect with others. So let's think about how to make it as easy as possible for the person to engage. Oh, sorry, I keep left clicking or right clicking instead of left clicking. So I want to talk about contented involvement. And this is a concept that I learned from doing a great deal of work with the Savvy Caregiver evidence-based program for caregivers of people living with dementia. And this is like the crux of that program, which is, and it's actually this same concept shows up in all the research about quality of life for people living with cognitive losses and their caregivers. And the key concept is people, including those living with cognitive impairments, can have periods of time during the day when they are engaged, focused, and enjoying the moment. So the expectation is not 24/7, because I don't think any of us easily pull that one off, but to make sure there are periods of time during the day where somebody is really engaged. And when they are, if you're contentedly involved, you are not at the same time confused. So this has got like a double power to it. And these are some just descriptors of what contented involvement might feel like. And I won't read it through, but you can see it. Especially I think the important one here is within one's abilities. Okay? However, if I'm contentedly involved, it can get disrupted by distractions, boredom, fatigue, physical needs, overload. So I could be in my beach chair at the ocean, staring, pretending to read my book, and just having a grand time. But if I realize I need to use the restroom, I'm not going to be contentedly involved again until I take care of that. So I have the ability to do that, but somebody else might need some help figuring out what was going on and addressing the issue. And there are three major factors that contribute to a person being contentedly involved. And the first one is the person. So what do they like? What do they not like? And the structure, which is what's the task like and how do you set it up? For the activity, I should say. And the third, the support, is what kind of instruction, guidance, and encouragement do they need from someone else to successfully participate? And the structure and support will change over time. A person who is losing cognitive abilities will require more structure and support. However, they will continue to be the person they are. So your best bet in identifying an activity is something that you know has appealed to them before, and you can maybe adapt and engage. So fitting the activity to a person. One thing is think about not so much their losses as their preserved skills. What do they still have in terms of interests and abilities? Because that's the key is to get started to engage somebody is finding something that appeals to them. Okay? And then look at the activity as a whole and then consider how you might break it down into smaller pieces. If they can still do something from start to finish, great. And they can do it safely. Absolutely great. But sometimes people are going to need some cues or they're going to need uh, a little more structure, a little more help. So instead of if you have somebody with cognitive losses in the kitchen with you and you say, would you make the salad? That may be too much for some people. That's too many steps. But if you just say, could you wash these grains? And when that's done, okay, could you shake up the dressing? You know, so you can break it into pieces and give them one job at a time. Okay. And consider what you need to provide cues for them and to give them help, particularly in getting started or in staying focused. Now, I will mention my beloved mother-in-law again, who had vascular dementia. She was an amazing pie baker earlier in her life. Oh, my word, she was good. And even later in her dementia, and she couldn't tell you what goes into pie crust. She had no idea. But if you put all the ingredients together in a bowl and you handed her a pastry blender, she went for it. And then if you put it on the cutting board and you handed her a rolling pin, she had it. She had done that so much, she could do it. And she could put the crust in the pan intact. But she couldn't have gone through all those steps on her own. So we just had to break it down a little bit for her. And then we had a really fun time making pies together. Let's take a little closer look at fit, because there's a couple of things. If fit is like saying you're right sizing something, and it's a key for all of us in terms of successful activity, performance, and engagement. It needs to be a good fit for any of us. Okay? So one is the task needs to fit the person's likes and their abilities. Okay? Another is for structure, setting up the task and surroundings to support that person's strength. And the third is the support, which is offering guidance to get started and to continue. And there are some elements to a task that are important to take into account. And the first is the person's skills. If you give me a task to, let's say, route out some wood, I don't know how to do that. So it's going to be a tough sell. Okay. If you give me a task to put some colors together, I'm all over it. Okay. So think about their skills. And then the complexity of the task. Just how many steps does it have, and how abstract is it? So are they going to need more visual or tactile cues? Or generally, as cognitive losses continue, abstraction becomes more and more difficulty, and people need more concrete input. Okay? Another is space and distance. So can the task be done in one place, or do they have to like walk around the house and find things? I am personally not much of a baker at all. And so my baking pans are stored in the basement. So if I had cognitive issues and my husband decided a baking activity would be just the thing, he's not going to send me to the basement to find the pans. I'll get lost down there doing something else. There's a whole lot going on in our basement. So his best bet would be to show up with the pans and have them all washed and ready for us to start the activity. Time is important too. How long can you realistically expect this person to focus? Even if they're really engaged, there may come a moment where it's just, okay, I'm done. And then size is, how many steps does the task have? And is there a way to reduce the number of steps or take care of the more complex ones to make it easier for the person to succeed? And then there's setting and structure. So the setting can have a huge effect on someone's ability to engage and stay engaged. Many of us would have trouble concentrating in an environment that was filled with noises and flashing lights. I'm good at focusing, and I think that one would do me. So the way the activity is prepared, displayed, and monitored affects how it goes. Okay? So my advice to you is think this through ahead of time, okay, based on the person's ability, but also be ready to adapt if you need to. And my bet is you already do this instinctively. But this means not only if the person seems to be struggling a bit, to maybe simplify, but it also means if they seem to be getting bored, is there something we can do to make it more interesting for them? Okay. And then structuring the setting helps. You can use that to help guide the person's response and encourage positive outcomes and improve the likelihood of success. So think about things like temperature, distractions, lighting, comfort, because any of those can interfere with somebody feeling contentedly involved. And then the last leg of that trio is support, which is basically any form of communication that helps a person become or remain occupied. Now, on this slide, the supports go down the left-hand column and then down the right-hand column, and they're written in order of written directions are the most complex directions to follow, even well-written directions. But it require just a lot more skill in processing. So may work for somebody early on, but it's probably going to wear out its welcome before too long. And then as you go down the list, demonstrations showing somebody how to do things, reminding them of the steps if they need a little more help staying on track. You may want to put hand over hand if somebody really needs some help to get started. You may hand them items one at a time if that's what their capacity is. I do. Sometimes people ask me, what does examples of a finished product mean? And I always think of this. If I'm going to cook a recipe, I really want a picture of what it might look like when it's done. It doesn't mean it's going to, but I just need that visual in my head. I need to know my goal. So even just something like that. Here's what we're making today. Here's one I put together, and now we can work on it. So choose these strategies based on the person's ability to follow that level of instruction, and keep in mind that that will change over time, and you may have to offer more concrete support. And then if we start thinking about everyday life, but also holiday celebrations, once you've got some strategies working for you, then it's important to help others understand what works so they can also do the same thing. And that also not only leads to success, but it helps the person with cognitive issues have a more consistent experience. So I'm thinking you have family coming and visiting, maybe someone is providing respite, or you work in a residential setting with folks with cognitive issues, and you have discovered that Mrs. Jones just does so well when you do yada yada. Uh, Tell the other staff. They need to know, or they may have a great idea too. So you can all enhance each other's interactions. Okay. It's also not a bad idea to tell people, things that really didn't go well. Yeah. I worked with a lot of family caregivers of people, older adults with dementia. And sometimes when we got talking about instructing family members, someone would say something like, well, frankly, I'd like to just let my brother come and take her for a day and see what my life is like. And, it's like, yeah, I understand why you may feel that way, but he won't offer a second time. So if the goal is he starts offering more often because it goes well, then, keep that at the front of your mind. And then follow up. If somebody else has used strategies, find out how they worked for them and find out if they discovered something else that worked nicely. Because often, if it works nicely for one person, it'll work nicely for lots of people. So, if we go back to thinking specifically about holiday celebrations, one of the things is scheduling for success. So, if the person has a best time of day, try to schedule the activities for them. Okay, if you know they are always just exhausted by 5 p.m., don't make dinner plans, make lunch plans so that you're catching them at an up time. And consider your own best times of day as well. And consider how much or what type of activity might be too much, either for you or for the person with cognitive losses. So try not to overdo. And at holiday times, that's something that easily happens. And we will touch on that a little bit more. Okay. Also, keep in mind, holiday diets often include a lot of carbs and sugar, and more than you might normally eat. And just to have in mind that those are inflammatory for a lot of people, so they may not feel as well. If I eat a lot of sugar, my joints are killing me. So since I love sugar, that's a good motivator for me to avoid it. And it can also inflammation can impact your brain function, and we want to keep things running as smoothly as we can. So let's think about setting priorities. Um, since we're all working with limitations in time, energy, and ability, we need to decide what is really important. And I have a really fun holiday job list for people to evaluate what holiday, any holiday activities uh, are really their highest priority. And I will include that when Catherine sends out the recording. So things to think about. Would the holiday feel complete if you didn't do it? Okay. Is it something you'd just like to do differently? You know, I've always hosted everything, but this year I'd really like to do a potluck. Okay. Do you do it out of habit, tradition, free choice, or obligation? And this one I truly love, the habit one. My parents, for their entire life with me around, um, before they set up the Christmas tree, they would set a newspaper out on the floor under the sheet that would go under the Christmas tree stand, which didn't entirely make sense to me as I grew up. And I kept thinking, well, if that's in case it leaks, frankly, I'd rather have a wet rug than wet newspaper on the wet rug. So, I kind of wasn't getting it. So one year when I was like 20 and, you know, questioning everything, I said to my dad, why do you do that? And he looked really startled and he said, I'm not sure. We've always done it. Your mother knows. So I went, found my mother and said, why do we do that? She said, I have no idea. So we tried it that year without the newspaper and nothing bad happened. And the next year the newspaper was back. It just, they, for whatever, nobody knew why, but there it was. So, I mean, it wasn't doing any harm, but it's kind of like, well, there's an extra step you could skip. Okay, so other things. Can somebody else do part or all of the different jobs? Or is this something only one person is able to do? Can somebody else be responsible for seeing to it that things get done? And do you enjoy doing it, whatever it is? Because if it's something you really hate, that's a good place to start to say, if I hate it, but it's really important, I might have to make a choice. But what if it doesn't matter and I don't like it? Pretty low hanging fruit to eliminate. Come on. We go. So holidays are built on tradition. And over time, the need for some of these traditions does change. So don't be compelled to keep on with traditions that really aren't working for you or that have become painful. Families may need guidance on how their traditions may need to be modified to fit the person with cognitive losses' current abilities. And that again is a good discussion to have ahead of time. We're not going to do a cocktail party for 50 this year. We're going to do small, intimate lunches with a couple of people. Okay? So try to keep expectations reasonable and recognize when you're stressed and honor that. You're getting stressed. How can you take care of yourself? How can you back up a little bit? Okay. And letting people help. And this is something that a lot of caregivers struggle with. Well, yeah, my son could do that, but he won't do it as well as I do, or he won't do it the way I do. Like, will he do it? Will it get done? Will it be good enough? Is this something or can you teach him to do it? Is this something that you can maybe find a middle ground on? Uh, Laugh whenever you can. And I have to say, even cognitive losses can have their moments of delight. And I don't mean laughing at the person, but I'll tell you, my mother-in-law occasionally came out with something that was so darn funny And later in her dementia, she lost her language skills. And we were talking about a highly articulate, extremely intelligent woman. I mean, crazy smart. And she was like, I would call her up. She lived out of state. I would call her up and she would start this like word salad thing. I had no idea. And she knew it. She wasn't making sense to me. So it frustrated her. And one time she was doing that, and I said, "Oh, Mary, those darn words." And out of nowhere, she said, "I know, I should write a book." It's like, since I heard from her in like a year, but it was in there and we laughed our heads off. It was really fun. So look for those little moments of delight. One time, she and I were quite close. And one time she was trying to introduce me to somebody who lived in the same retirement community she did. And she forgot my name. And we both just looked at each other and just went hysterical. It was so silly. I mean, I'd been in her family for going on 40 years. It's like, whatever, okay. But it was fun to be able to laugh together about it rather than be like exasperated with it. And do things you enjoy. So it doesn't have to be all about what everybody else wants. Another starting place to think about is balance. So think about activity, think about rest, visiting versus solitude. We can't do any of those 24/7 as a rule. And this is true whether it's a holiday or not. This is a day-to-day challenge in all our lives, but it becomes even more important during times of stress, both for the person living with cognitive changes and the people providing care. So balance for you and balance for the person. I got thinking about traditions, the holiday expectations, old issues, I mean, things we talked about earlier, as well as holiday decorations, social requirements relating to holiday celebrations, and the need that some of us have to just do it all ourselves. And it occurred to me that while in your home, you have some control over this, particularly decorations and expectations. If you are in a professional caregiving situation, particularly something residential, you may have little to no control over those. So the decorations are the decorations and they're going up. Uh, and the party is the party, and people go to the party and do the best they can. So, and in a professional situation, you may be dealing with multiple people with different cognitive issues, and of course, different personalities, different likes and dislikes. So that can start to get to be pretty tricky when you're trying to meet the needs of multiple people, and in figuring that everybody else on staff has all of these too. So do what you can. This is a good moment for maybe some clear communication with other staff members and maybe some pre-agreement as to what will and won't happen and who should or should not be involved in it. So how to make it work for as many people as possible, including the caregivers. In a family situation, hopefully you can collaborate a little more to find solutions uh, using other family members. I was told a story recently of a woman an older woman, who realized, I think her husband had died the previous year, and she realized she just could not face decorating for the holiday. she couldn't do it. She didn't want to go get a tree. I mean, she would like to have decorations, and her family was coming to her house, but she didn't want to do it. She didn't, oh, too much. And so she said to her adult children and her grandchildren, said, I still want you to come, but I'm not decorating the house, although, I wish I could. And they all said, well, why don't we come early and we'll decorate it? And they had a wonderful time, and they decorated the house, and then they celebrated in the decorated house, and then they helped put the decorations away. So they had that time together. They actually had a little extra time together doing something that made them all feel good. So sometimes you can really find some nice collaboration. A couple other things I wanted to touch on with you. One is gifts. Now, in your own family home situation, you may be choosing gifts for a person living with cognitive impairments. And if you are helping people in a working situation, family members may turn to you for suggestions of what might be an appropriate gift for a person experiencing cognitive losses. So I have a few guidelines for you. Don't give gifts that require a lot of care or attention or may present hazards. So, no pets, no power tools. If a person has the tendency to wander off, uh, some kind of safety item like a GPS or an ID bracelet might be a very appropriate gift. And the GPSs now are coming out, that look like wristwatches or that go in your sneaker. So it can be something that is not invasive for the person, but still gives them and those who care for them peace of mind that they will not get lost in a way that it's very hard to find them. And now I live in Maine. Wandering is a huge issue among people with cognitive issues. And they tend to go towards water, shrubbery, the woods, which is like 80% of the Maine terrain. So it's a huge deal if somebody wanders off. They could be anywhere. So I've done some training for law enforcement on some of these issues and encounters with people with cognitive issues. But also, take a look at some of the gadgets and devices, and you can just Google them, and all kinds of stuff will come up, like GPS for dementia. You'll get a ton. Comfortable clothes that are easy to care for, can't go wrong. Warm, safe footwear, again. Home health equipment. Would somebody benefit from a very cool looking grab bar or a tub seat? And would that be something that would be ongoing helpful to them? Rather than a puppy live, maybe a stuffed animal. Some people find them very comforting. Now they're making them behave like the real deal. I'm amazed. Okay. Something like a picture album can be huge, and there's a couple ways to do this. The gift giver could put together a meaningful picture album for the person, or the gift giver could bring an album and a whole bunch of pictures, and they could create the album together, which is a whole nother fun thing to do. But it's really nice then. Many people really love looking through the picture albums and remembering, particularly of early days, which is what many of us hold on to, even if our more recent memory is getting fuzzy. My mother-in-law had put together these wonderful chronological picture albums. I mean, she spent forever on it before she developed her dementia. And one of my favorite activities with her was to look through them, particularly the old family pictures, because she could pick up on people that I wouldn't have recognized. And the other was one she had of my kids when they were little. So that was really fun to look through. And one time when I was visiting her, I got out a picture album of my kids small, and we went through it. And then she and I were going down to dinner, actually, where she forgot my name. And so I left the album on the table in her apartment, thinking she might she wouldn't think of it if it was on the shelf, but maybe if it was out, she would think of it. And we got back from dinner and she saw the album on the table. Like, this is 2 hours later. And she said, "Oh, look at this." And we sat down and we went through the whole thing a second time, and it was just as much fun. And I am one of those parents who would be happy to tell you the same story about my child as many times as you'll tolerate it. So uh, she was a great audience for that. You know, did I ever tell you about the time he? No, tell me. So that can be a gift that keeps giving. Uh, Simple, familiar games. I'm probably not trying to learn some complex new game, but ones that the person already knows. And into her dementia, my mother-in-law still liked to play solitaire. And eventually it was sort of not very well organized solitaire, but she was playing by herself. She was fine. You know, she wasn't frustrating anybody else with being a little loose on the rules. Music and movies, the things that you already know the person would enjoy. And another one that I think is kind of a cool possibility is bird feeders. If somebody is in an environment where that can be done, that's hours of fun to watch birds or watch other creatures try to get at the bird feeder. And then the other thing I wanted to think about was, as caregivers, what's a good gift for a caregiver? And just in case someone asks, so an activity, tickets to do something. And then I think the other key piece is a plan for respite so that the caregiver can attend. Okay, so maybe I got you and your best friends tickets to this movie, and I'm going to come stay with your husband that while you go. Dinner out or dinner delivered, or there's all kinds of gift cards for um, dinner deliveries. Help with housekeeping. A lot of caregivers tell me they are just so swamped with everything else that the house becomes a low priority. But for some people, that bothers them a lot. So maybe there's a way to offer something there. Or a coupon to try out an adult day program for a day and see how it goes. And of course, my personal favorite, a massage. If as a caregiver, that's something appealing. So I want to have time for some questions, and I have not been looking at the Q&A or the chat. So let me, please, if you have some questions for me, Q&A is my favorite, but if you don't have Q&A, please use the chat rather than not. Some of the new stuffed animals with aromatherapy or even warming inserts might be nice gifts. And, you know, that's an interesting point. I didn't, an aromatherapy, if it's in the home, sure. If it's in a facility, they may have limitations on that because some people have allergies. But, or if you know that the residential place where you are providing care has, you know, don't wear perfume rules, you might alert families to that so they don't gift something that in fact can't be used there.
For
And
some people, the robot pets work. You have to be very careful to make sure it's not something that's frightening, that I
Yeah,
have found people who take on the care and become attached. This is especially where there's places that there can't be a live pet, which I'd always prefer the live pet.
yeah.
But I've seen it be
But you
very
have to take care
successful.
of a live pet. So,
Yes, yeah.
and the robo cats and dogs. Yep, that's somebody is suggesting. Um,
Hmm.
I actually, I sing with a group, and once a month we sing at we sing for people at the end of life. We sing at a long-term care facility, and this woman was sitting in the hall with two RoboCats who looked exactly like my cats. And I did a double take. Like, wow, they're being so calm. If you have questions, also feel free to use the Q&A or the chat. It looks like I can't open the Q&A.
I can, but I don't see, there's no open questions, that's why. We had one earlier about will this, the PowerPoint be available? And I sent back yes. It will be available when the recording is sent out along with the other resources and attachments that that
And
you are
I
going to
will
provide.
include it's like a grid checklist that I really like. I modified it from something that the SIDS network, the Sudden Infant Death Syndrome network, came up with to help grieving parents kind of sort out how overwhelmed could they be when they were in such grief. Um, and I will include that. And if you like, I can also include when I worked for the local agency on aging for a long time, and one of the worksheets or informative things that I put together was sort of a summary of some ideas for holidays and visits, including a sample letter you might consider sending to family members ahead of time to say, here's how things are looking now. We're looking forward to the visit, but some things are different. And here's some suggestions, and we'll see you then. Okay.
Yeah. And we have a question from Danielle. Would these strategies still be acceptable with someone who already had depression for the holidays before they started to develop dementia?
I would say yes, um, because engagement in activities is also very helpful when someone is depressed, assuming that they are able to, uh, they're not so depressed they, can't get out of bed kind of depression. But yeah, in productive activity has been researched and shown to be effective in helping to treat depression. So yes, again, choose your activities. If I just find holiday music just bums me out, let's not put it on. But if I find, if you find that kind of perks me up and I start singing along, it's a great idea. So think about what is it about the holidays that somebody might be depressed about? And first of all, is there something we can do about that? And I will, because we have a couple minutes. Um, People can be both depressed and have cognitive issues. And one of the things that gets a little tricky with that, oh, leave my mouse alone now. One of the things that gets a little tricky is sometimes it's a little hard to sort out what's what. So if somebody is apathetic about engaging in activity, could be depression, could be cognitive, could be both. So some folks, a good starting strategy, if you think depression might be in the mix, and talk to the healthcare providers and see if they think that some kind of treatment for the depression is worth a try. And it takes a little while. Things don't change overnight. Um, but even if I still have cognitive issues, if I if my depression is better, I'll function at a higher level and I'll feel better. So it's worth a conversation with the person, the family, the healthcare provider to say, is this worth a try? To just see. Oh, well, thank you for thanking me. Is it a good idea to let them help do their laundry as an example? Do they want to? Kathy, you're muted if you're actually saying something out loud.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I was. I was answering first for myself. I read the question to you. I'm so sorry. But it depends on the person. If the person loved laundry, even if they can't do it the way they did, but just coming in the laundry room and helping out is soothing. For someone like me who can't fold, it's been genetically left out of me. That might be the most frustrating task you can give. So it's apply it to the individual and what you knew that the individual liked prior to the cognitive decline.
And sometimes people will participate, even if it's an activity that someone really never did before. They'll participate because they're doing it with the caregiver and it's fun time together. But certainly don't give them the task of doing laundry that something very bad would happen if it went in the washer on the wrong temperature. And break it down into steps. So instead of saying, okay, you do the laundry, I mean, at some point, somebody can do that maybe, but it might be, let's put the towels in the washer. Here's how much soap would you pour it in? And so break it into little steps and consider, if it's a high risk thing for whatever reason, that wouldn't be my first choice. But for some people, like my mother-in-law with the pie, some people, some tasks that we learned and learned and learned and learned, stay put, and you can still do them. She could chop vegetables like nobody's business. She was totally safe. And I was standing right next to her and watching her, and I'm an OT. And she had just done so much of it that she was careful with the knife. She knew exactly what she was doing. At some point, that was no longer a good idea for her. But we were able to keep her, because she liked to cook, and she and I liked to cook together. We were able to keep her going on it for quite a while.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Um,
any
yeah.
activity could be appropriate if it's something the person would engage in, and you can adapt it for their abilities.
I do think the comment made earlier that one of the stresses for the holidays is trying for perfection. I think especially those of us who are in the healthcare field or in the helping fields, we expect so much, especially that what we'll be able to do with our family, and we expect perfection for ourselves in providing the support and perfection to be the perfect patient or the perfect person with dementia will accept everything that you as supposedly the expert will provide, and that can add so much stress, especially over the holidays.
And
There is also a question, what are some ways that you can help someone who is overwhelmed during the holidays that doesn't really ask for help? I imagine many of you identify here. Like they won't let go of things like planning or traditions. They really can't keep going and accept a helping hand.
that is really hard for some people, especially if they consider that activity part of their role in the family. And having always been the holiday entertainer in my family and the caregiver, um, it's been really liberating to say, well, why don't you come early and we'll all cook together, which is what we're doing next week for Thanksgiving. And I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. But it took a lot for me to not say, no, don't bring anything. I'll take care of all of it. Or I remember talking to one caregiver she was taking care of, I think it was her mother-in-law in the house, and she was the primary caregiver, and her husband was kind of not really engaged in the process. And after the fact, she told me they'd had 30 family members for Thanksgiving. And I said, I mean, I was just like, whoa. I said, my gosh, I hope people, loaded the dishwasher or something. She said, oh, I don't have a dishwasher. It's like, no, 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 no. Somebody else needs to take on this job. It is hard if people, if it's a meaningful role, sometimes you can find a way to modify it. What if your two adult children do this part, consult with them. Actually, that's a good opportunity for something like a family meeting. Like who could do what? My current discussion with my daughter-in-law is, are we doing Thanksgiving at our house or their house? And I'm fine, I don't care. But we've got more workspace, so it may end up being here. But it's like thinking about sort of handing over the baton is not a bad thing. I could do that. But that was not what I would have said 20 years ago. And it's been an evolution and going through some caregiving that's made me say, okay, that's not working. So having a conversation and validating that while it's important to you, it may not be the most important priority for their time and energy, particularly if they're getting stressed. There was another thought that just flitted right through my brain.
Let me add one while you're thinking of it.
Okay.
Ruth has added another fun way to have a family activity would to be to get the dishes done together. That's what we do. Some cook and then the rest clean up.
Yeah.
I like
And
that.
even because usually if I've been the cook, I'm sort of on lazy duty for cleanup, but I stay right in the room because it's fun. It's hysterical. I mean, it's part of the party. So yeah, and certainly one of the things it might really be worth, because there, other family members may share that concern about she gets so stressed, but she won't let me help. And maybe that could be a conversation with the person stressing and engaged family members about how that might go. I just realized I left my slides up unnecessarily.
You're fine. Just you have the letter on, but that's fine. Can you not see the screen?
I can see the screen, but let me see. Huh, it's not letting me. All right, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yes, we don't have to have perfection.
This is true. We're not likely to get it from me, so
It's okay.
good to be realistic.
Yeah, seeing lots and lots of thank yous. Can't wait to share with clients, families, with their others as well.
Thank you. That was my thought that flitted in and out. Sometimes it's a hard conversation to open up with somebody who's getting stressed and doing too much, but you have the perfect opener. I went to a webinar on Wednesday, and here's what they were talking about. And I thought, it made me think of you. And I wonder if we could figure some stuff out. How could I help this be easier? You've got the natural opening.
Perfect answer. Anne, it's always a joy to be with you, to spend the time. I really appreciate your flexibility this afternoon to work with the less expert technological person here.
Well, luckily we didn't run into any glitches.
No major glitches. We're all good. We so thank all of you who came on live, and also those of you who will be listening to the recording and hopefully using the recording over time as well. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We're going to give you back about 10 minutes of the afternoon you didn't expect. And thank each of you. Please don't hesitate to send in ideas of presentations you'd like to hear in the future. We'll be happy to work on them for you. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for giving me great joy today, as well as Anne with being here with us and present. Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you.